Life had its own way of being unremarkable for me. My name's Rita, and at 29, you'd find me tucked away in the local library. It wasn't glamorous or thrilling, but it was mine. The books were my companions, and the dusty shelves, my domain. I wasn't one for the spotlight, happy to fade into the background. The town was small, the kind where everyone knew your business before you did. My daily routine rarely varied: wake up, work, and then home to my tiny apartment filled with second-hand furniture and a mountain of books. My social life was non-existent, and I was fine with that, or so I kept telling myself. Ethan came into my life on a day much like any other. He was looking for a book, something different, he said. His smile was easy, and his voice had a warmth to it that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Hey, could you help me find a book? I'm feeling adventurous," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Sure, what genre are you interested in?" I asked, adjusting my glasses, trying not to get too caught up in his gaze. "I don't know, surprise me," he replied with a grin that suggested he enjoyed the mundane challenge he'd set before me. That was the beginning of everything. Our conversations became a regular part of my days. He'd ask about books, and I'd recommend titles, but soon those conversations shifted from the pages of novels to the details of our lives. Ethan was different. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel heard for the first time in a long while. One day, he came in looking more determined than usual. "You know, Rita, you're the most interesting person I've met in this town. Why do you hide in here all day?" he asked, leaning on the counter, a playful challenge in his eyes. I laughed, a sound that felt strange even to my own ears. "Well, where else would I go? This town isn't exactly bursting with excitement." Ethan's response was quick. "Maybe you just need someone to explore it with. How about dinner tonight? My treat." I hesitated, not used to this kind of attention. "I don't know, Ethan. Come on, what's the worst that could happen? You spend an evening out with a guy who enjoys your book recommendations. Plus, I promise to make it worth your while. You can show me this hidden gem of a town," he coaxed, his confidence infectious. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. "Okay, sure. But no fancy places, I don't do well with all that pomp." "Deal," Ethan said, his smile lighting up the room. "I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something comfortable." That night changed everything. Ethan showed me parts of the town I'd never seen, despite having lived here my whole life. He made me laugh, a deep, genuine laugh that I hadn't known I was capable of. He listened to my stories, my dreams, and my fears, never once making me feel small or insignificant. As we walked back to my apartment, he stopped and looked at me, a seriousness in his eyes. "Rita, I know we've only just met, but there's something about you. You're not like anyone I've ever known. You're genuine, and in a world full of fakes, that's rare." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. "Ethan, He cut me off, gently placing a finger on my lips. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I see you, Rita. I see the person you are, and I like what I see." Ethan had always been the sweet spot in my day, making everything seem brighter with his care and affection. He had this way of making me feel seen, calling me beautiful, kind, and smart, things I hardly believed about myself. It was his warmth that won me over, making the idea of forever seem not just possible, but desirable. When he popped the question, it felt like a dream. "Marry me, Rita. I can't imagine my life without you," he had said, his eyes shining with sincerity. I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I breathed out, feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. But before we could get lost in the whirlwind of wedding planning, there was one crucial step we had to take: meeting his parents. Ethan had given me a heads up, a sort of pre-warning. "My folks, they have a bit of a high standard for who I bring home. But don't sweat it, okay? They're gonna love you once they see how amazing you are," he assured me, though his nonchalance did little to ease my nerves. I was a wreck before the meeting, rummaging through my wardrobe for something that screamed modest yet dignified. It felt like an impossible dress code to crack. Ethan, on the other hand, was the picture of calm, almost disinterested, as if the outcome of this meeting didn't weigh on him at all. "You're overthinking it, Rita. Just wear what you're comfortable in," he said casually, which only frayed my nerves further. The day arrived, and I chose a simple blue dress that I hoped struck the right balance. As we drove to his parents' house, Ethan seemed more preoccupied with the music on the radio than the impending introduction. "You sure they're gonna like me?" I asked, seeking some reassurance. They'll come around. Just be yourself," Ethan replied, his attention briefly flitting to me before returning to the road. His laid-back attitude felt jarring compared to the storm of anxiety brewing inside me. Walking up to the door of Ethan's childhood home, my heart was pounding. His earlier warnings echoed in my head, painting a picture of the scrutiny I was about to face. The door swung open, and we were greeted by Ethan's parents, their expressions hard to read. The dinner that followed was a minefield. Ethan's parents grilled me with questions that felt more like an interrogation than casual dinner conversation. "So, Rita, Ethan tells us you work at a library. Do you see yourself doing that long term?" his father asked, his tone suggesting he found my job lacking. I fumbled for an answer, trying to sound confident. "I love working there. It's fulfilling in a way I can't quite describe," I said, hoping my passion would be enough to win them over. Ethan was strangely quiet throughout, offering little support as I navigated the barrage of questions and veiled criticisms. It felt like I was alone on the battlefield, with Ethan retreating into a role of passive observer. As we drove home, the silence in the car was deafening. I couldn't help but feel disappointed, not just in the evening's events, but in Ethan's indifference. "I thought you said they'd warm up to me." I finally broke the silence, my voice tinged with hurt. Ethan shrugged, a frustratingly nonchalant gesture. "Give it time, Rita. They just need to get to know you better," he said, his words doing little to comfort me. After a few more dinners that felt more like interrogations than friendly meals, it was clear Ethan's folks weren't my biggest fans. They saw me as some kind of gold digger, I guess, which couldn't be further from the truth. I was never after Ethan's money, heck, I barely knew about it until he brought it up himself one evening, saying, "My parents are a bit old school, you know? They worry about the weirdest things, like money and status." One night, Ethan came home looking more serious than usual. "Babe, we need to talk," he said, avoiding my eyes. That's when I knew something was up. "What's wrong?" I asked, feeling my stomach tie up in knots. "It's my parents," he started, finally looking at me. "They're insisting we sign a prenup." "A prenup?" The word felt foreign, bitter on my tongue. "Ethan, you know I don't care about your money, right?" He sighed, running his hands through his hair. I know. And I don't care about it either, not when it comes to us. But they're adamant about it. They think it'll protect both of us or whatever." I was hurt, not gonna lie. It felt like they were already betting on our failure. But I loved Ethan more than I cared about his parents' approval or some stupid agreement. "Fine," I said, more sharply than I intended. "Let's sign it and be done with it. Your money, my money, whatever. I don't care. I just want you." Ethan looked relieved, and a part of me hated that. "Thank you, babe. I hate this as much as you do, but it's just a piece of paper. It won't change anything between us." So, we signed the damn thing. Some lawyer his parents knew drew it up, making sure neither of us could touch the other's stuff if things went south. It felt like signing a declaration of distrust before we even started, but I pushed those thoughts away. I was in love, and love was supposed to conquer all, right? Our wedding was nothing grand, just the way I wanted it. A few close friends, an intimate ceremony, and the promise of forever. I moved into Ethan's place shortly after. It was a nice house, nothing too fancy, but it felt miles away from my old apartment. Ethan's parents lived nearby, which I soon found out meant surprise visits that were more about checking up on me than anything else. Life with Ethan started off like something out of a fairy tale, but it wasn't long before the gloss started to fade, revealing the grim reality beneath. The shift wasn't overnight, but the signs were there, creeping in slowly, eroding what we had built. His mother, Linda, was the first crack in our perfect picture. She'd drop by unannounced, her eyes scanning the house like she was taking inventory. "Remember, this is Ethan's house. Everything here is his." I tried to keep my cool, replying, "I'm well aware, Linda. I'm not here for your son's things. I love him." She scoffed. "Love doesn't pay the bills, dear. Just remember, if you ever leave, you leave with what you came with, nothing." One day, she paraded around the house, pointing out every piece of furniture, every appliance, every knickknack that Ethan owned. "See this couch? Ethan's. That painting? Also Ethan's. Remember, dear, in case things go south, you have no claim over any of it," she said, her voice laced with venomous sweetness. It was as if she relished reminding me of my place in their world. Ethan's father, George, wasn't any better. He and Linda acted like they owned our house, not just visiting. They'd demand coffee the moment they walked in, critique how I made it too weak or too strong, then settle in front of the TV, expecting me to wait on them hand and foot. "Grab us some of those chips, will you? And maybe wash those clothes piling up in the corner while you're at it," George would say, not even bothering to look at me. The worst part? Ethan never said a word against it. He'd laugh along, adding his own jabs. "Yeah, she's still learning how to do things right around here. Give her time." I felt like I was losing my mind. This wasn't the man I married, this was someone else, someone cruel and dismissive. "Do you even hear yourself? How can you let them treat me like this?" I'd confront Ethan after his parents left. "Babe, they're just set in their ways. You know how old people are." He'd shrug it off, making it sound like I was the one overreacting. "They don't mean anything by it. Plus, you know we're on their dime. Can't bite the hand that feeds, right?" That line hit me like a slap in the face. So, that was it. I was just the freeloader, the girl who married into their little empire and had to play by their rules or get out. My job at the library, which I loved, was a joke to them, just another reason to look down on me. The days blurred into each other, each one a repetition of the last, until that unremarkable Tuesday when everything changed. I was at work, shelving books, when I felt a sharp pain in my stomach, doubling me over. It wasn't just stress, it was something more, something worse. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling my nostrils. Lying in that hospital bed, I couldn't help but think how this was a new low. Alone, in pain, and not a single message or call from Ethan. Just when I thought things couldn't get any darker, a knock on the door heralded a visitor I never expected. "Rita Turner?" The man at the door was dressed in a suit, holding a briefcase, looking wildly out of place in the sterile hospital room. "Yeah, that's me. Who are you?" My voice was weak, tired from the pain and the endless cycle of disappointment. "I'm Michael Johnson, a notary. I have something important to discuss with you." His tone was formal, but there was something in his eyes that made me want to listen. I motioned for him to continue, curiosity piqued despite the situation. "It's about your great-uncle, Edward Turner. He passed away recently, and, well, you're his sole heir. Rita, he left you an inheritance." The words didn't make sense at first. "Are you sure you've got the right person? I haven't seen him for 15 years. Michael nodded. "Quite sure. He was a private man, but always remembered you. Wanted to make sure you were taken care of." Lying in the hospital bed, feeling a mix of confusion and anticipation, I watched as the notary prepared to delve into the specifics of my great-uncle's will. He cleared his throat, opened his briefcase, and laid out the documents in front of him. "Rita, your great-uncle was a man of substantial wealth and taste. He left you quite the inheritance. We're not just talking about cash here, though there's plenty of that, $20 million to be exact, Michael began, his voice steady and matter-of-fact. I blinked, still trying to wrap my head around the numbers. $20 million? I echoed, feeling my voice crack. That's right, he continued, unfazed by my shock. But there's more. You're also inheriting shares in several large companies. These are not minor investments, we're talking significant stakes in some of the most stable and profitable firms out there. My mind raced, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what he was saying. Owning parts of companies I'd only heard about on the news seemed like a fantasy. And there's the property, Michael went on, flipping through the papers. An old, large house in one of the most prestigious areas. It's not just any house, Rita. It's a mansion with history, acres of land, and it's all yours now. I tried to imagine the house, the kind of place I'd only seen in movies. It was overwhelming, to say the least. Don't forget about the antique car, he added with a slight smile, as if anticipating my reaction. A classic, fully restored, and in mint condition. It's a collector's dream. I chuckled, the situation bordering on surreal. An antique car, too? What am I going to do with that? I barely drive as it is. Michael's smile widened. Well, it's yours to do with as you please. Maybe take it for a spin now and then? And then, there's the furniture and paintings inside the house, genuine antiques, some of them centuries old. Your great-uncle had an eye for the finer things in life. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as I tried to digest everything he was saying. So, I've inherited a fortune, a company, a mansion, an antique car, and a collection of art and furniture? That's unbelievable. It's all yours, Rita. Your great-uncle wanted to make sure you were well taken care of. It seems he saw something special in you. Special? I felt anything but, especially lying in a hospital bed after the worst few months of my life. Yet, here I was, a millionaire many times over, entrusted with a legacy I didn't know existed. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. This is a lot to take in. I don't even know where to start, I admitted, feeling a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. We'll take it one step at a time, he assured me. I'm here to help you through the entire process. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Ethan's name flashed on the screen for the first time in days. Ignoring it, I turned back to Michael. What happens now? We'll need to process some paperwork, but the inheritance is yours. Your life is about to change, Rita. Change it did. After the unexpected windfall landed in my lap, Ethan and his folks turned a new leaf, or so it seemed. Their daily hospital visits were like scenes from a sappy movie. Ethan, who couldn't be bothered to check on me before, now hovered constantly, adjusting my blanket with a concerned furrow on his brow. How are you feeling today, love? He'd ask, his voice dripping with a sweetness that didn't reach his eyes. His mother, Linda, was even more theatrical, if possible. Darling, I'm going to cook your favorite lasagna when you get back home. Just you wait, she said, her smile wide but not quite reaching her eyes. It was all too much, too sudden. Yet, I played along, smiling weakly, thanking them for their care. But suspicion gnawed at me, urging me to look beyond their acts. So, one day, I did just that. After their routine visit, I mustered the strength to slip out of my bed and follow them, my heart pounding with every step. Hiding behind a corner, I listened in as their true selves unfolded with no audience to perform for. Their laughter was the first thing I heard, harsh and jarring. Can you believe how easy it is? She's terribly stupid. She's eating right out of our hands, Ethan said, a chuckle escaping his lips. Linda was more calculating, her voice sharp as she laid out their plan. Make sure she makes a baby with you, Ethan. Once she does, she won't ever be able to leave us. Then, we'll have a real hold on her and her fortune. Their words, cruel and cold, didn't shock me. Disappointment filled me, yes, but surprise? Not in the slightest. They showed their true colors, and I was done painting over them in shades of denial. Silently, I made my way back to my hospital bed, their mocking words fueling a fire within me. They saw me as nothing more than a ticket to wealth, a means to secure their future. But I wasn't going to play their game. Not anymore. Lying in that bed, a plan began to take shape, clear and firm. I was going to turn the tables on Ethan and his conniving family. They underestimated me, saw me as weak, but I was about to show them just how wrong they were. Back at the house after being discharged, I felt like a stranger walking into what was supposed to be my home. Ethan and his parents were there, waiting, their faces painted with fake concern and eagerness. The atmosphere was thick, charged with unspoken tension and expectation. Ethan was the first to break the silence, his voice a blend of feigned sweetness and underlying greed. "Babe, you're home. How are you feeling? We've been so worried about you." Ignoring the lump in my throat, I met his gaze squarely, seeing the man I once thought I knew. "I'm feeling better, thanks. But we need to talk." "All of us," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Linda, ever the actress, stepped forward, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. "Of course, dear. We're here for you. Whatever you need." It was now or never. I took a deep breath and laid out my cards. "I'm filing for divorce, Ethan. And before you ask, no, you won't see a dime of my inheritance." The room fell silent, the air sucked out of it as if by a vacuum. Ethan's face paled, his mask slipping to reveal the panic underneath. "Divorce? But why? I thought we were happy?" "Happy?" The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "You, your mom, and your dad have made my life a living hell. You've treated me like a servant, not a wife. And now, suddenly, you're worried about me because I'm worth something to you?" Ethan stammered, struggling to find the words, but Linda, always quick, jumped in. "This is nonsense. We've always treated you like family. You're imagining things, dear." Rolling my eyes, I pulled out the prenuptial agreement from my bag, waving it in front of him. This is what saved me. You thought you could play me, but I'm not the naive girl you took me for." George, silent until now, finally spoke, his voice a mix of anger and defeat. "You'll regret this. We're your family." "No, you were never my family. A family doesn't treat one of their own like dirt and then turn sweet when money comes into the picture. I'm done here." Moving into my own place was the breath of fresh air I desperately needed. The apartment was small and cozy, a stark contrast to the life I'd left behind. It wasn't just a new living space, it was my declaration of independence, my fresh start. The phone call started almost immediately. Ethan, with his voice dripping with desperation, was the first to break the silence. "Rita, please, you've got to come back. We can work this out, I know we can." His pleas fell on deaf ears. I was done, and no amount of begging could change that. "Ethan, it's over. I'm not coming back. You need to accept that," I said, my voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. Not long after, Linda chimed in, her tone a toxic mix of anger and guilt-tripping. "Ungrateful. After everything we've done for you. You owe us, Rita. You're making a huge mistake." "Owe you? For what, Linda? For making me feel like nothing more than a burden?" "No, I don't owe you anything. Goodbye." Hanging up on her felt like shedding a heavy weight, a final cut from the ties that bound me to a life of misery. The divorce was a relief, a clean break from a past that had threatened to consume me. Through friends, I heard about the fallout between Ethan and his parents. The irony wasn't lost on me, the very document they had insisted on, the prenuptial agreement, was now the source of their family strife. With my great-uncle's inheritance securely in my name, I found purpose in generosity. A significant portion went to charities that mattered to me, causes that would make a difference in the world. But it was the bookstore that became my passion project, a cozy haven for lovers of old and rare books. It was my way of reconnecting with the world on my terms. My journey hadn't been easy, fraught with challenges and heartache, but standing in my bookstore, surrounded by the stories of countless others, I knew I had found my happy ending. It wasn't just about moving on from Ethan and his family's manipulation, it was about rediscovering who I was and what I loved. Here's to new beginnings. I toasted to myself one quiet evening after closing up shop. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to travel, filled with possibilities and the promise of newfound happiness.
I sighed deeply as I tossed my laptop onto the couch, frustrated by yet another argument with Derek and Casey. It was like a broken record, playing the same tune of disrespect and dismissal over and over again. "Is it really too much to ask for a little help around here?" I said, glaring at Derek lounging in his recliner, engrossed in some mindless TV show. "I work just as many hours as you do, but somehow all the household responsibilities fall on me." Derek barely looked up from the screen. "If you have a problem with how things are, then maybe you should quit your little hobby and focus on being a better housewife." My blood boiled at his condescending remark. "My little hobby is a successful freelance design business that brings in half our income, you ungrateful ass." Casey snickered from the couch, his eyes glued to his phone. "Yeah, but let's be real. Dad's the one with the real job carrying this family." I whirled to face him, my frustration reaching a boiling point. "You've got a lot of nerve, mooching off us while contributing nothing but snarky comments." Derek finally looked up. "Don't talk to my son that way. If you did your job right, he wouldn't have to lift a finger." That was it, the final straw. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, emotions raging inside me. You know what? I'm done. I'm so damn tired of being disrespected and taken for granted in my own home. "Where are you going?" Derek called out, a hint of surprise in his voice. I paused at the door, turning to face them both with a defiant glare. "Somewhere I'm appreciated. Don't bother calling until you've learned to value everything I do for this family." With that, I stormed out, slamming the door behind me. No more being a doormat. From now on, they were going to realize exactly how much I contributed, and just how invaluable I truly was. I pulled into the parking lot of the Bluebird Motel, a small establishment on the edge of town. It wasn't the Ritz, but it would serve its purpose, providing me a quiet refuge to work and gather my thoughts after that disastrous argument. As I entered the modest room, I tossed my bag on the bed and opened my laptop, desperate to meet the looming deadline for my latest design project. With a deep breath, I tried to push aside the swirl of emotions and focus on the task at hand. But my mind kept drifting back to the years of being dismissed and disrespected by Derek and Casey. All the nights I stayed up late, burning the midnight oil to meet client demands while still handling all the household responsibilities. The endless loads of laundry, grocery shopping, meal prepping, tasks that went completely unappreciated by my so-called family. Tears of anger and hurt stung my eyes as I recalled Derek's callous words, reducing my thriving design career to a mere hobby. As if the income I brought in wasn't just as vital as his paycheck in keeping our household afloat. And Casey was no better, content to leech off our hard-earned money while mocking my contributions. The smug entitlement radiating from that spoiled brat made my blood boil. No more. I was done being the unsung hero, the unappreciated workhorse of the family. If they couldn't see my value, I'd make them feel the impact of my absence, and they'd be damn sorry they took me for granted. With renewed determination, I attacked the design project, pouring all my frustration and pent-up resentment into creating something truly exceptional for my client. I'd show them all what a little hobby could achieve when passion and talent joined forces. By the time the first rays of dawn peeked through the curtains, I had put the finishing touches on what might be my best work yet. A small, satisfied smile crossed my lips as I hit send on the file. "That's just a taste of what you've been overlooking, fellas," I muttered under my breath. "Get ready, because you haven't seen anything yet." After basking in the satisfaction of delivering a stellar project, I turned my attention to the next phase of my plan. It was time for Derek and Casey to truly feel the impact of my absence. With a few taps on my laptop, I remotely canceled the utility payments and halted the automated grocery and household supply orders. A twisted smile crossed my lips as I pictured the chaos that would soon unfold back at the house. Sure enough, within a couple of days, my phone started blowing up with angry texts and calls from Derek. "Reagan, what the hell? The power and water just got shut off." I let the call go to voicemail, ignoring his demands for an explanation. Then came a barrage of texts from Casey. "Yo, did you forget to pay the bills again? Real nice, we have no Wi-Fi now." As the days passed, the messages grew increasingly desperate. "Seriously, babe, let's talk this out. The house is a mess and we're out of food. Mom, I can't even do my laundry. This is getting ridiculous." Part of me relished in their rising panic and dependence on the order I used to maintain so effortlessly, but I remained stoic, unmoved by their pleas. Finally, after nearly a week of radio silence from me, Derek showed up at the motel room, his face flushed with anger. "Open up, Reagan. I know you're in there." I cracked the door open, eyeing him coolly. "What do you want, Derek? Cut the crap and come home. This little tantrum of yours has gone far enough." I laughed derisively. "Tantrum? I'm simply giving you both a glimpse of what life is like without me handling everything." Derek's eyes narrowed. "So what, you're holding the household hostage? Real mature, Reagan." "Don't act so shocked," I shot back. "You'd think after all these years of me running the show you'd have a little more appreciation for everything I do." To my satisfaction, Derek's bravado faltered, seemingly at a loss for words. "Don't worry," I continued. "I'm happy to restore order and make your life comfortable again. But first, you're going to start showing me the respect I deserve around here." With that, I shut the door in his stunned face, leaving him to stew in the disarray he once took for granted. A couple days after my confrontation with Derek at the motel, I decided to pay my mother, Vivian, a visit. I needed a break from the escalating tensions with my husband and stepson, and her place had always been a peaceful refuge. "Honey, it's so good to see you," she said as she ushered me inside, "though I wish it were under better circumstances." She gave me a concerned look. "Derek called, ranting about you refusing to come home. What's going on?" I sighed, plopping down on her well-worn couch. "The usual, Mom, me doing everything while he and Casey treat me like a glorified maid." I shook my head. I finally put my foot down, and now they're feeling the consequences. Vivian pursed her lips but didn't argue. She knew better than anyone the disrespect I'd endured from my family over the years. As we chatted, my eyes drifted to a battered cardboard box tucked in the corner of her living room. "What's all that?" I asked, nodding towards it. "Oh, just some old papers and mementos," she replied with a dismissive wave. "I was going through the attic and found it mixed in with your father's things." My curiosity was piqued, and I rose to take a closer look. Vivian didn't object as I began sifting through the box's contents, a jumbled assortment of letters, receipts, and other documents. That's when I spotted it, a stack of banking statements and overdue notices from several credit card companies, all addressed to Derek. "Mom, what is all this?" I asked, a sinking feeling in my gut. Vivian peered over my shoulder at the papers. "I'm not sure, dear. Your father never mentioned anything about money troubles." As I examined the documents more closely, it became disturbingly clear that Derek had been hiding massive debt from reckless gambling by the looks of it. And based on the dates, this had been going on for years, long before we'd even met. Anger and betrayal lanced through me as I realized he must have been siphoning funds from our joint accounts to cover his losses and avoid collections. Memories flashed of all the times I'd carefully budgeted for household expenses, only to have my figures thrown off with no explanation. My hands shook as I gathered up the damning paperwork. That lying, cheating bastard! Vivian's eyes widened at the venom in my voice. "Reagan, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself as I rose. "Just found another reason to stick it to Derek, that's all." I marched out of her house, plans for revenge taking shape in my mind. Derek wanted to see how valuable I was to our household? Well, I was about to demolish his world, starting with the crumbling financial facade he'd worked so hard to maintain. Armed with the evidence of Derek's deceit, I felt a renewed sense of determination. It was time to take my revenge to the next level and really make him squirm. I marched back to the house, the box of incriminating documents tucked under my arm. To my surprise, the front door was unlocked. Clearly, Derek had grown complacent in my absence. You've got a lot of nerve showing your face here, Derek spat as I barged into the living room. Casey looked up from his phone, eyes widening. Hey Reagan? I ignored them both, dropping the box onto the coffee table with a thud. You want to know why I've been refusing to come home? Take a look. Derek frowned as he riffled through the papers, but his expression quickly morphed into one of horror. Where did you get these? He hissed. Oh, from your stash of secrets you've been hiding all these years, I countered. Nice gambling habit, by the way. Been having fun blowing through our savings? Casey's brow furrowed in confusion. Wait, what's going on? Stay out of this. Derek snapped at his son before turning his glare back to me. You had no right going through my private affairs. I scoffed loudly. Private affairs? You mean the affairs you've been keeping from me while draining our accounts behind my back? Realization seemed to dawn on Casey's face as he looked between us uncertainly. Derek, meanwhile, had gone pale. Seizing the opportunity, I pressed on. Here's the deal. Either you shape up and agree to some serious counseling to work through this massive betrayal. I let the words hang in the air as Derek clenched his jaw. Or I take these papers and every shred of evidence about your reckless behavior public. For a moment, Derek seemed to weigh his options. His jaw twitched as his gaze flickered between me and the documents. You're bluffing, he finally said, though his tone lacked conviction. Am I? I challenged, stepping closer until I was nose to nose with him. After all these years of me covering for you, playing the dutiful wife while you ran around like a selfish child, I'm done with your crap, Derek. It's time to face the consequences. Derek opened his mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it. A tense silence stretched between us, the air thick with unspoken anger and resentment. Finally, Casey cleared his throat. Maybe you guys should just, go to that counseling thing? His expression was almost pleading as he looked imploringly at his father. Derek's nostrils flared, and I could see the war raging behind his eyes, pride battling pragmatism. With a decisive sneer, he seemed to make his choice. Forget it, he spat, whirling on his heel and storming out of the room, leaving a stunned Casey gaping after him. A cold smile crept across my lips. If Derek thought this was the end, he was sorely mistaken. I was just getting started. Derek's obstinate refusal to face his issues and attend counseling was the final straw. If he wanted to cling to his misguided pride, so be it, but he wouldn't be dragging me down with him any longer. It was time to expose him for the deceitful, reckless man he truly was. I spent the next few days meticulously gathering evidence, documentation, and personal accounts that portrayed Derek's shameful behavior. With a little creativity and some slick graphic design work, I crafted a damning expose that left no room for doubt regarding his gambling addiction and shady financial dealings. Finally, I took to social media and various community forums, blasting out the incriminating compilation far and wide. Within hours, the reactions began pouring in. Oh my God, I had no idea the Moros were dealing with this. Derek always seemed like such a stand-up guy. This is horrible. How could he do this to his wife and family? Disgusting. I watched with grim satisfaction as Derek's meticulously crafted public image crumbled in the wake of his hidden indiscretions being aired for all to see. But I didn't stop there. No, Derek's humiliation would be complete. Leveraging my finely honed marketing skills, I launched a promotional campaign for my design business that highlighted my personal journey of perseverance and self-empowerment. Inspirational graphics, uplifting messaging, and carefully selected testimonials from clients painted a portrait of the talented, resilient woman I was, in stark contrast to the disgraced scoundrel I'd endured for far too long. Within days, my social media was ablaze with an outpouring of support and admiration. New business inquiries flooded my inbox, and my following skyrocketed as people rallied behind the heartwarming story of my professional triumph over personal adversity. Amidst the whirlwind of attention, I received a call from Derek. His voice was low, seething with impotent rage. "You're ruining me," he growled. "Is that what you want? To see your husband lose everything while you bask in the spotlight?" A cold smile crossed my lips as I reveled in his pain. "I want the world to see the truth about who you really are," I replied evenly. "As for me, I'm simply rising from the shadows you kept me trapped in and shining a light on my own worth." There was a pause, then Derek exhaled a shuddering breath. "You're going to regret this," he grated out, then abruptly hung up. But as I surveyed the overwhelming positivity surrounding my newly empowered image, I felt nothing but vindicated resolve. Derek had sown the seeds of his own demolition. I was simply the one bold enough to finally reap what he deserved. In the aftermath of my explosive revelations about Derek's misdeeds, the fallout was even more satisfying than I could have imagined. His reputation in tatters, he became a pariah, the subject of gossip and disdainful whispers wherever he went. But the true coup de grace was his rapidly deteriorating financial situation. Once the creditors realized Derek's web of lies had been exposed, they wasted no time unleashing the force of their collections efforts. Suddenly, all those gambling debts he'd been frantically juggling came crashing down in one fell swoop. It wasn't long before Derek was knocking at my door again, this time with a very different demeanor. Gone was the arrogant bluster, replaced by the pathetic, almost groveling air of a man watching his life unravel. "Reagan," he began, his voice uncharacteristically meek. "You've made your point. You win, okay? I was wrong and I screwed up badly." I folded my arms and eyed him coolly, unmoved by his obvious attempt to play on my sympathies. "What do you want, Derek?" he sighed, rubbing a hand over his face warily. "I need you to come home. Help me straighten this nightmare out before I lose everything." A harsh laugh escaped my lips. And why exactly would I do that, after all the lies, the deceit, the blatant disrespect? I shook my head slowly. "No, you made this bed, Derek. Time to lie in it." Frustration flickered across his features. "Don't be unreasonable, Reagan. Our lives, our finances, everything is intertwined. If I go under, it'll drag you down too." "Maybe you should have thought about that before gambling away our future," I countered flatly. Derek opened his mouth, no doubt, to offer another guilt-ridden appeal, but was cut off by an unexpected voice. "She's right, you know." We both turned to see Casey emerging from the shadows. His expression hardened. "You only have yourself to blame for this whole disaster." Derek's eyes widened in surprise and hurt at his son's accusatory stance. "Casey, you're taking her side? After everything I've done for you?" But Casey remained resolute, his jaw set in grim determination. "No, Dad. I'm just seeing the truth for what it is, instead of letting you feed me more lies." He shook his head slowly. "Reagan's the one who's been holding everything together while you jeopardized it all with your selfishness." A muscle twitched in Derek's cheek as he struggled to find a rebuttal, but nothing came. In that moment, he looked utterly defeated, just a sad, pathetic shadow of the arrogant blowhard he used to be. I couldn't help but feel a surge of vicious satisfaction at seeing him crumble, forced to confront the consequences of his ego and the crumbling facade of the life he'd built on my sacrifice. "Get out, Derek," I stated flatly, unwilling to let his self-pity sway me further. "I'm done cleaning up your messes." With one last broken glance between me and Casey, Derek seemed to shrink in on himself as he turned and trudged away in silence, leaving me to begin setting the course for my new, unencumbered life. With Derek's pathetic, tail between his legs retreat, a massive weight lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt truly free, liberated from the chains of his deception and toxic disrespect. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly, as Derek had little ground to contest my demands after the spectacular implosion of his life. I didn't ask for much beyond my fair share, content to start over unencumbered by his mounting debts. As the final paperwork was signed and notarized, I couldn't help but steal a glance at the hollow, broken husk of a man sitting across from me. How quickly the once smug, arrogant Derek had crumbled in the wake of his own hubris. Part of me felt a twinge of pity, but it was overwhelmingly overshadowed by the immense sense of relief washing over me. "This is really what you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a mumble as he stared blankly at the divorce decree. I met his gaze levelly, my jaw set in firm resolution. "It's what I deserve, Derek, to finally be free of your lies and disrespect." He opened his mouth as if to protest further, but seemed to think better of it. With a slow, resigned nod, he scribbled his signature and pushed the papers back across the table. Just like that, it was officially over between us. I was a new woman, unshackled from the unhealthy dynamic that had stifled me for far too long. In the days that followed, I wasted no time in beginning my new chapter. The money from my divorce settlement, combined with the windfall of new business from my viral campaign, allowed me to purchase a cozy 2-bedroom house just outside the city. Simple but chic, it was the perfect fresh start, tailored to my solo needs, though I did make sure to convert the spare room into a comfortable suite where my mom could stay whenever she liked. "This place is just perfect for you, honey," Vivian gushed as I gave her the grand tour during her first visit. A warm, proud smile crinkled the corners of her eyes as she pulled me into a tight embrace. "I'm so incredibly proud of the way you stood up for yourself." I hugged her back fiercely, basking in the swell of emotion brought on by her unconditional support and my newfound independence. For the first time in ages, I felt complete, self-assured, and in control of my own destiny. Over the following weeks, I settled into my new home and routines with a vigor and optimism I hadn't experienced in years. Each morning, I'd wake up energized, ready to dive headfirst into a new slate of exciting design projects and business opportunities. And in my downtime, I'd look around my little sanctuary, the cozy living room adorned with hand-picked decor, the sunlight streaming through the windows, and smile contentedly. This was my hard-earned reward, a tangible manifestation of the strength and resilience I never knew I possessed. The old Reagan, who meekly accepted disrespect in the name of keeping the peace, was gone forever. In her place stood a self-assured woman who understood her immense value and self-worth, a woman who refused to spend another day in the shadows of an ungrateful partner. And as I reflected on the tumultuous journey that led me to this new beginning, I silently vowed to never let anyone or anything dull that inner fire again.